Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Advent Life podcast. Today we have the most beautiful studio that we can create, which is directly in the nature and surrounded by the garden. We set a place where we can discuss very interesting topics, and today a topic of discussion is challenging the pathways of education and really defining what success truly is. So we are going to like different panelists can simply join the conversation and contribute as they wish into the topic, basically. So we are not going to introduce ourselves like each individually, but as someone wants to speak, they come and introduce themselves, just for the audience to understand who they are talking to, and share their experience and their research or knowledge they want to share, or some inputs. So it is very interesting to look the current case of traditional education and compare it to, from economical perspective, to market needs, but as well what I would personally call true needs of life, like what truly needs to be done in our environment and how well we are prepared to answer that. Does anyone want to maybe, from their own experience, see how they were educated, maybe in a traditional system, and to what extent that traditional system reflected what was actually needed when that education needed to be implemented? Was it useful? Was it not? To which extent was it useful? To which extent it was not? And where did you find some alternative sources where actual education did create certain good outcome and results? So the question is open, and I invite any panelists who wants to join and share their experience.
Could you ask the question again? This can be edited out. Could you ask the question?
No, it's all live. Sure. So, I can maybe start?
Sure, please.
Yeah. So, my name is Daniel Prestichan. I come from Croatia. And my kind of pathway of education was regular primary school and secondary school. I went to a gymnasium, we call it in Croatia. This is like a regular gymnasium is a regular education that prepares you for the university. In my bachelor degree is in entrepreneurial economics, and I have truly found, but that's from a private school, which was really creating their curriculum based on the experiences of entrepreneurs directly in the market, and they were trying to then feed into education and skills that are necessary for that. And I really, from this part of on my educational experience, I've really valued it very much, because I have learned the real life business and managerial skills that were taught there. And then I went to study master degree. I had this very beautiful, really an insightful experience that I was a volunteer in Uganda for one international development and relief agency, ADRA, if somebody is familiar with it. And I had the best job ever. So I was given a camera, and I was put in a car. I will go together with staff on different projects, and I will record documentaries. I will collect people's stories. I will understand their problems, their circumstances in life, and I will record it, and I'll bring it together and try to tell the story and present the stories of those people to those who don't know them. That made me want to study that more. So I did it from the practical perspective, and then at that time I wanted to do something with media and international development. That's what I did. And there was only maybe 2 or 3 places in the world that did that. One was in US, one was in UK, and I was lucky enough, or by God's providence, I managed to get to this in a master degree with media and international development. But what I can say is I really didn't learn much practical skill there. I learned more of theoretical basis of media, of what media is, and the whole media spectrum, yeah. But I have really not learned specific, maybe still skills of storytelling, skills of particular way of communication, and something that really connects directly to being very deeply and practically involved in media, which I wanted. So from one side, one part of traditional education really focused on what I needed and practical skills, which was my bachelor degree, specifically at that university. And the second one was more of theoretical knowledge, which now by the world I'm recognized as a well-educated person, but I don't think that particular education brought any practical value to day-to-day life later on in my profession. So is there anyone else who would like to share their own experience and in which way traditional education really benefited them and in which way it actually lacked?
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I think in the UK, I went through the nursery reception, primary school, the secondary school, what we call as college, which is the part just before university. When I look back on it, the benefits that I got from traditional education wasn't really the studying. It was the engagement and relation when it comes to people. That was it. When it came to actually studying, I think looking back on it, I really just hacked the educational system to an extent, because the way I learn, I don't usually like learning sitting in a classroom and someone telling me that A plus A equals pi. I'm sure A plus A don't equal pi, but that's what I remember from the dialogues. Was I would rather, when the person's speaking, I'd rather think, why is A plus A pi? Is there another way of doing it? And sometimes my attention span just wouldn't go along. So my way around it was usually finding one child, making a paper plane or putting paper inside an elastic band and then shooting it at his head. It was my way. It's not, looking back on it, it's not good, but because my attention span, it didn't really work too well. Engaging people, laughing, being what they'll call the class clown was the way out, because outside that it was boring. But then what I used to do is that when it came to test time, the whole year I wouldn't pay attention. But the last month beforehand, I would just find some teacher and find a way to keep him coming or exchange something with him so that he could just teach me the formulas with the test papers. And I found if I took the test papers and learnt the formulas, I'd be able to pass the tests. Because if you don't pass the tests, you realize that the aggro you'll get from the parents at home, it'll be a lot. But I say this really to say, when it comes to education, I found the engagement with people, solving problems, what you like doing, being able to give it to people and then be able to provide a service, or exchange something, I found it more engaging. But saying that, you have to keep the parents quiet, right? So I went to university. I think I'm the only person I know that dropped out of university twice from the same university 2 times.
What do you mean?
So what I mean is that, should I say this on radio?
Please
in
do.
the UK, it's the student loan system is unique. At the time I went, you'd be given grants and loans, and you only pay it back when you earn more than £15,000. So I went the first time, didn't like it, but I liked the money. So I went, realized I couldn't do university. I went the second time while I figure things out to keep the parents quiet. Went, enjoyed the student loan, and decided to use those funds to start a business. But I didn't enjoy the university, and the reason why I didn't enjoy it is that it suits certain people that learn a certain way. They can sit down, they can absorb the information, and then do a test. I like to ask questions. I like to ask why. I like to understand the core of it. So what would happen is that if I would sit inside a lecture room, a lot of the kids would get it. I wouldn't get it at that moment, and sometimes it can make you feel like a fish trying to climb a tree. It's not that you don't have any abilities or skills, just that the tree isn't the arena you best thrive in. And I think for me a critical point was I was studying estate management at the University of Greenwich, and I asked my tutor there at the time, you see all these, as I did estate management because I wanted to go into properties. I asked the lecturer, so you see all these properties you talk about and all these spreadsheets. Do you do it yourself? He says, no, that's for me, I don't do it. My wife does it, but as for me, I'm too scared to invest in property. I think that was the last time. And I don't remember going to a lecture after that. The last meeting I had with him was that I'm not coming back here again. And then I went to start a business somewhere, because it really did then show me that actually going in the field and learning and getting experience is a better way. Sitting down and the theory, etc. Theory doesn't necessarily mean education, and nor does it mean actually being able to do it practically, because you'll tend to find that what you learn in the universities, one, may or may not be relevant, but things would have changed, and the rubber don't hit the road when you meet into the practical world. So I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing that. This one crucial moment that you are sharing there is that truly education needs to be transferred from someone. Education needs to be transferred from someone who actually is practicing particular trade or skills towards someone who is willing to learn. So we are in education, we are not here to teach the theory. We are here to some extent, the educators need to be qualified in actual implementation of what they teach in the real world circumstances. Yeah. So sometimes that's the case, sometimes that's not the case. And then I would really like to go deeper into that part. And before this podcast, we had really interesting conversation, and that was kind of the reason why we kind of gathered together to talk openly about it. Is we went through the history of history of education in the past, and specifically also history of education in the time of Reformation, specifically in Reformation in Europe. So I will ask our friend Rob to maybe say more about the history of education through time and how it changed. We talked about guilds. We talked about transfer of knowledge and skills from one generation to another and how that developed. Can you say more about that?
Sure. So I think if we were to kind of take a step back and reset about, I think the biggest thing is that we've got to, in order to understand anything, we have to reset our minds. Right now, everybody has this idea that we have to go and get a 4-year degree, a 6-year degree, an 8-year degree, whatever it is, in order to be successful, in order for the world to want to hire us. And in all actuality, most individuals don't use their degree. Most people hiring don't even look at what the degree says. They just say, oh, they have a degree. Okay, it looks like they're willing to take the time to put the work in, so I can hire them. Most people aren't working even in the field that their degree is in. So I think the point is that in order for us to see this, I think we've got to. This is not a tweak to a system. This is a radical destruction, a radical removal in our minds of what we think education is in order to start over. We can't. I don't think we can. I think the conversation, if we make a conversation and we say, well, we want to just how do we reform education? I don't think it's possible.
You don't think it's possible?
There is no reformation of a Babylonian system. Is what I'm trying to say. The whole concept. In fact, I'm gonna grab some slides here.
I think we should first define what is the purpose of education, because what Jeffrey was telling, he was not satisfied with the outcome of his education. But if we talk, is it what you mentioned, how to be successful, and what does it mean to be successful, or is it something else? What's the true purpose behind education? And I believe it's something that the world needs. He needs to men and women, certain type of men and women that can benefit the world. So education is supposed to be a vehicle of achieving that goal. And I think it would be good that we can define what exactly is the purpose of education.
Okay, let's start there. What's your definition?
So I would say this education we are in, like I have been gone through, like most of us here, just giving you a knowledge which I believe has its own values, but the true value that comes in education is to form a character. That's something, it cannot be in that regard, it cannot be devised from true biblical teaching and true of education, because biblical educated person produces a good character, the character that the world can benefit of a person who's it's on the all order of Christ.
So basically you are suggesting the purpose of education is character building rather than acquisition.
It should be.
Can I read a few quotes?
Yeah, sure.
So I think maybe what we'll do is let's start with what we're told in terms of what is, and let's just define real quick what is true education. We'll get into what that one is. So it says, now as never before, we need to understand this true science of education. If we fail to understand this, we shall never find a place in the kingdom of God.
Wow.
So true education is salvational. And I think that's something that's really important we have to understand. That this is not like, hey, let's see how we can reform the Babylonian system. No.
Yeah.
This is literally a fundamental re-understanding. The school of the prophets were created because people lost their way. They had no understanding of what education was. The school of the prophets were formed to help people out of Egypt. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that higher education is that which is imparted by him, out of whose mouth comes knowledge and understanding.
And him is here
Christ,
clearly Christ. Yes.
Oh, that's the slide above it, right? Jesus says, I am the truth.
Yeah.
Right? So anything that's not founded, true education must be founded in Christ. It must be founded in biblical principles. It must be founded in object lessons.
But why is it so? So why is somebody who is listening to, like if you can zoom out and pan out to see, who is not a Christian, who doesn't believe in Christ and so on, why is that important? Like, I would come to point that to say, hey, the character is important, but that character is like whooshy-mooshy thing that nobody understands what the true character is supposed to look like. And it's not realms of knowledge and expertise as much as a wealth of excellence of character, and how does that look like? So that's what I found in my search in that regard, was to meet personally Christ. What has been revealed in the scripture, what he's a true representation of who God is, because in so many different religions you will find some sort of ways and different views of who and what God is, and the most beautiful one, the most fruitful producing character one, is the one that Christ has built. This is what I want, and this is what I want to be educated. But as a young person who has been growing up, who in early age you're moldable, as you grow up you're less moldable. It's not unchangeable, but it's more to, we are speaking of a character mold. It's like all the traits. What is character, by the way? It is how would you define a character?
Thoughts and feelings.
Thoughts or feelings?
Yeah.
Thoughts and feelings?
Combined make up the moral character.
All right. So how do you train your thoughts? How do you train your feelings? Is that something that just sporadically comes in, or are you going to do something about that to have a handle on it? And many people struggle with this. From that point, you come with many people who struggle with anxiety, depressions, those are modern illnesses. It's like people form families, which is the bulwark of the societies. Those families are broken just for the sake of lack of character, and you gotta be honest to admit this. It's a lack of character.
So let's go back to the anxiety. Oh no, that's what first. I was gonna say, if you mentioned anxiety, the number one cause for anxiety usually is some sort of cognitive dissonance, an idea that we understand one thing and yet we're doing another. And I think when we really get into the whole realization of our bodies tell us, I want to be in the country. Our bodies tell us, I want to be eating healthy food. Right? Our bodies tell us, I don't want to be sitting behind a desk in a factory, some sort. And yet our lives say, well, I need to make money in order to post on Instagram, this fancy trip to whatever it is, or I need to have the fancy house and the fancy car so I can show that I'm successful, because our self-worth is tied to achievement.
Yeah, I'd like to comment here. My name's Danella, and I'm just someone that's unlearning from what life taught me, and I figured out one day that what life taught me was really a lie. And so I want to share a little bit of that in listening to this conversation. And I think cycling back, putting it in there that we all talking, and majority of people I think that will ever listen to this needs an understanding that we're in the dark. Like, we're coming to the light. Some people maybe are more in the light than others, but we've all started out from this place of being deluded. Like, the Bible says the God of this world has blinded our minds, right? If your eyes are blinded, you can't think. But if your eyes are blinded, you can't see. If your mind is blinded, then you can't think, right? And it's a pretty bad place to be in if your mind is blinded. There's something else that the Bible says is that, that there's something going on that steals the heart. If your heart is stolen, like, the seat of your emotions and your affections and your decision making, and we don't even recognize that our minds are blinded and our hearts are stolen. So we're just living life like this is normal. And Jesus, he said to people, he said to them, I've come that you might have life. And I often say this, that who is he talking to? Like, it's not that he was talking to dead corpses. They were living, they were breathing, but they didn't have life, right? They were alive without life. And this is the whole thing, that we're like blinded minds with stolen hearts, and we are alive without really living. And if I could say something about education, I would switch the word with development, because with all true development really has its source in understanding who God is and where we came from. And that's the one thing that is being blinded out from our minds, our understanding, our imagination, our very concept of what living is. And so, like, when we think education, we've been programmed to think of school or of a qualification, of a test, or of a classroom. Like, we've been programmed for that to be attached to the word education. And when we think about development, it's something entirely different in our minds. But in God's world, they're exactly the same thing. Like, He created us to develop continually into His image. And if somebody wanted to go against that plan, then they would just switch what it meant in your mind to be educated to a piece of paper, as opposed to becoming a better person. And so I think this is what we're dealing with, is not only a lack of true education, but I think a lack of understanding of what it even means to be a real human being. Like, there is a false development going on, and everybody thinks that's the real thing. And it's going back to, wait, what does it mean to be alive? And so it's true that a lot of anxiety, depression, it stems from this lack of purpose, because we're living in this space that we're being told this is what real life is, and nothing makes sense to our hearts and nothing makes sense to our minds, because we weren't created to be alive without really living. But that's what we're doing. And I think that's why we need this redefinition of what education is, what success is, and I would even say what life is, what really constitutes true living.
So what would be the success?
Can I actually come back to what you said? I know that Danella is, you're also like working on the mental health with people. You're kind of like a mental health coach. And can you share some stories, not by name and surname, but kind of in which particular, is there any pattern that you are seeing continually among your people who you consult, who you are coaching, and how these stories do reflect an actual condition that of which we are talking of, those problems that we currently have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a theme that I think is consistent among probably every single person that I've spoken to over my years of coaching is a sense of purpose. And even when we're dealing with relationships, an understanding of my identity and who I am is critical to understand how I relate to anybody else. And the majority of people that come to me are coming with some kind of a relational thing, whether it's something that happened in the past from a relationship. When I say relationship, I'm not talking about a romantic relationship. I'm just talking about, something that went wrong with their parents or their siblings or their work colleagues or their best friend, or, something that went wrong somewhere, from the past, the present, or a fear of something in the future. It's all relational. Majority of it is relational, and a loss of my identity, because without an understanding of who I am and why I'm here, like, God created me to be a channel of His goodness, His love, the things that come from Him. I'm a conduit, and in that I find my greatest happiness and my greatest joy. And there is such a burden that comes from me thinking that I have to somehow create those things in myself or get them from somebody else. God never expected any of those burdens to be on us, but when He's cut out of our picture, then they lay on us really heavily. And so we're here in the midst of anxiety, like, wait, I don't know how to give to people what they expect from me, and I don't know how to get from people what I expect from them, and God never intended any of those things to happen. And so I've had young women who are broken from failed relationships. I've had still talking to people who are struggling in failing marriages, people who don't understand how to reconcile wrongs that were done to them from their parents in their estimation, people who are in the depths of depression because they have these skills, they've gone through this education, they don't know what to do. All the options in front of them seem useless. This is not the reason why I'm here. I don't want to go into this job, like Rob was saying before. I don't want to stay at this office. I don't want to do this, but I have to, because how else am I going to survive? So I just kind of have to check out of who I am, or who I think I am, or who I want to be, and just slot into some box about who the world says I should be, and just kind of make it work. And I'm screaming inside saying, I can't stand this, I'm trapped.
So I love to touch on that, right? You said, what I'm hearing from this is that it feels like we want to live one way inherently. Our body is telling us, the Holy Spirit is telling us we want to live one way, right? Not our body is in the spirit, our body is in like literally like, hey, I want to have more nutrients, I want to have more sunlight, I want to have exercise, right? That kind of thing. Plus the Holy Spirit telling us. But we then say, well, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to do this?
Yeah.
This is literally what I'm saying, is that fundamentally, we cannot have a true education in order to live in a Babylonian world.
Yes.
You are not going to go through true education and be successful for a Babylonian world. Now granted, we can talk about, you asked earlier about people that went through formal education. I didn't, right? And I was successful in a Babylonian world.
We would like to hear that.
No,
as well.
but the point with that though is that I wasn't then happy, right? True happiness is here. It's in nature. It's being able to hear God. It's being able to see the object lessons. Everything Lucifer wants to do is remove any instance of God. Here, I am dependent on the rain. I'm dependent on God. I'm dependent on all these different pieces, whereas Lucifer wants to create, concrete structures, right, where we never see green. Green impacts our minds. Anyway, I'm on a tangent on that. What I'm trying to say is this: if we're talking about how do we find happiness? How do we get rid of anxiety, right? Well, it's country living. And I think that needs to be the forefront. And so then the question is, how do I sustain country living? Or if we keep trying to figure out how to sustain a Babylonian model, right, through God's principles, it can be done, but it's kind of, I really feel like they're two buckets.
Can it be done?
Well, yes. I mean, I think you can. I think that it's harder in terms of a capitalist society because there's decisions you'll make that you'll decide not to make if But I guess it's for me, it's like this: is I don't think that there's a foot in, a foot out. I think we really need to say, like, it's time for a radical transformation. I want to be a peculiar people, right? Like, I think that we need to understand that we've got to get out of the cities. We're told this over and over. In addition to getting out of the cities, we've got to train ourselves to being sustainable in the cities. And that means everything from gardening, construction, and also missional business. Anyway, I don't want to hijack this. You touched the point that triggered something in me that just said, like, how do we then translate this back to Babylonian? No, we don't.
You should leave.
Let's get out. Why are we trying to be in a Babylonian system? And that's the piece that I'm trying to argue. Is I don't see them as complementary. I see them as distinct.
Right. So let's talk about off that then. I think my question is, what does that look like? Because you mentioned something, and I think what you said is very true, that why are we trying to train ourselves like I need true education in order to be successful in the way that the world defines success? Okay, so that doesn't make any sense. But God called us to be the head and not the tail, right? So it's true that we do need a redefinition then of what success is. I'm in true education to be successful, but that's not what the world sees as success. However we've redefined success, even if the world doesn't say that's successful, we will prove to them that it's more successful than what they're doing. And I think that's the most important thing. Like, they may look at us and say, lunatics, but in the end, or even not even in the end, like, it will be evident quite quickly that what we're doing works better than what they're doing. And I think this is what we need to get to. Like, what does that actually look like? Because lots of people are saying this, and the demonstration is falling far short. Right, like saying it, and it's some kind of a it's not quite hitting it. I think there are lots of people whose heart is beating with this. Like, we need to understand a different method of education so we can do it better, but still trying to blend it with the world's method, or still trying to follow something, and so it's falling far short. What does it look like to be the real head and not the tail? And what does that even look like? Like, God's definition. That's, I think, throwing out there.
There comes a part that we need to also understand, that the way that the world is progressing is that we need in such a way that there needs to become a different way of thinking.
Yes.
Especially now when we have pandemic behind ourselves. So some people got so scared when they realized that their livelihood are just falling apart, regardless of what title of education they have had. They are useless. If they got fired from their job, for instance, they get into a college degree, whatever they got into, and they realize their dependency on the system that the world is currently on. So imagine that as people define success is like, hey, I have a lot of money, I have I live in a city, an apartment, I do whatever I want, I just can travel and so on. All of these benefits at some point, as happened, like a glimpse of it happens in pandemic times, was that you lost it with, look, I don't want to get into the whole vaccination story and so on, but there were some people who said, hey, I don't want to get vaccinated. It was not according to their conscience to do that, and they have a right to manage their own life. And so, rightfully so, they didn't want to get vaccinated, but had to remove some of their freedoms. Now, try to define success in that line. You know what I mean? I believe that true education is putting you into place where you become a free person, and truly free in the sense of self-sustainability, that you can sustain your own self, your family, and perhaps even a community.
Free, including freedom of conscience.
Including the freedom of conscience. So you're not going to, and the freedom of conscience is something that is closely connected to the character development. That's important to understand, because if you defile your own conscience, the retributions of that will drive you to some decisions which will eventually form your character. It can be a bad thing.
So we're talking this idea of success, right?
Yeah.
Success in this, we've mentioned freedom of conscience, freedom of commerce, independent from maybe food chain, these different things like this. I think for me, when we start thinking about this, is I don't think we're doing a good enough job as Adventists in demonstrating that this is amazing out here. It feels like when I talk to people about country living, they think it's as Owen White says, a privation, right? They think that it's like, oh, wow, well, okay, good for you. I believe that we can have abundance in country living. Now, that doesn't mean emulating the city in the country, right? One of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to rebuild this idea that we don't need to try and recreate the city here, right? We have to understand, like, how, like the school of the prophets ate out of one big pot, right? Like, how do we emulate that, right? How do we eat off of a campfire? Which, by the way, that's how we would do it here, right? It's easy here, right? But that's what I'm trying to say is that, like, how do we make that feel awesome? Why do people go camping? Why is it that we have this inherent need in us to go camping, right? So, how do we make country living permanent glamping, right?
I think something that
and share
Michael
that.
said,
Right?
yeah, the change in thinking, right? Because I was sharing with some people, some of us earlier. Comfort and convenience; those two things are really like the biggest barriers to experiencing true freedom. We don't understand that we're trapped in comfort and convenience. So it does also take a decision, a determination. Like, I remember when I first learned, like, oh wait, we're supposed to be in the country. I didn't grow up in the country. And I got to a place where I was in the garden every day. They were putting me in the garden every day. And I had to say in my mind, I'm going to unlearn it and I'm going to enjoy it. Let me understand. Let me even just be willing to taste of the fruit, to begin to experience that joy without that unwillingness. Like oh, the bugs, oh, it's too hot, oh, it's too muddy. That is just going to keep me away. And what's that? That's comfort and convenience. So it's like I don't want any dirt under my nails. I don't want my nails to break. If a drop of water ever gets on me, I'll melt. It's like, and to understand, like, wait, my mind has actually been like channeled in this way, so I'm trapped in it without even realizing that I'm trapped in it, and to just give myself a chance to think differently. Like, I remember growing tomatoes. The first time I was like, I've never seen a tomato grow. I don't know what that looks like. And I planted this tomato and it grew. And the day I ate my first tomato, it was like heaven came down and glory filled my soul. I was like, wait, I grew this thing. Like, nobody, you don't understand the joy of that. Growing up in the city, and you've never experienced that. And it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. And I thought to myself, this is real joy. But I never experienced that before. And to get there, I had to be willing to go through something that in my mind I defined as discomfort. It wasn't really discomfort, but I'd been so channeled into thinking that I needed to be comfort and I needed convenience around me, that I had to be willing to overstep those things in my mind to even get to what that joy looked like.
I would put a comment to that as well. When it comes to really true motivation for country living, when I listen to discussion, it goes almost like in two ways, yeah. And I think it's important to do it, but it's also important to do it for the right reasons. So one of the wrong reasons to go to country living is fear. Is fear what's going to happen there. Is fear this and that. There are lots of people talk about different conspiracy theories and stuff. But and then you come here and then you that cannot sustain you long term. That cannot keep you going long term if you do things from fear. If you do things because it's said that and therefore needs to be done. Why don't we go and recognize this as a best place for development,
yes.
The best place for spiritual growth,
yes.
As the best place to experience such simple beauties that you have described. Like this week together, we have this improvised outside kitchen. I remember we would bring bread and hummus and I'll put it there, and this is and then I would sit there and behind me is a garden and said such a good tomato will be just perfect here. So I kind of walked 50 steps there, find what I found the most nicest, the most juiciest. I've cut it there. I think I'll just bring it for myself, but I'll bring several more. Like, people were not really interested, but that tomato was cut, and when I was put on that plate, it disappeared. It was gone. So why don't we, when we look into moving from cities towards the area which are more connected, which are true. Which God, I mean, there's a real estate. I don't know where this word is coming from, but it's a where do we go to a real, the one that God has created, and a state in which we can have around ourselves and surround ourselves with kind of influences that are bringing us closer to God as well, and experiences some of those simple joys of life, rather than trying to continually rush for that dopamine rush continually through different, I will say, like a plastic plastic waste. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
So I love that we have a lot of different topics we're hitting right now, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple ones, and what I'd love to do is maybe grab a few of these. We'll form our mental tree, right? And we kind of go on a branch, we explore it, we come back down, because I think we're hitting a lot of really cool topics. And one you just said was, the idea of country living, sharing, the joys of it, right? We're kind of in that. The second piece is what the reasons is, and I would love to dive in more into the reasons, because I think that there is, even in the Advent community, a large amount of people that are thinking, I'm going to go to the country for the time of trouble. They don't get it. They don't get it. The country living is not for the time of trouble. In the time of trouble in the sense of I'm going to run in the middle of the mountains, right? We are told we are not to be a light under a bushel.
Yes.
We should not be leaving the city to go hide in the mountains. We should be leaving the city so that we can then be sustained, right? So when the time of trouble does come, we're not thinking about the time of trouble, right? We're thinking about, now we got to put the most amount of evangelism, because we know the Holy Spirit's been working in the heaviest way at that point, right? So I guess it's that whole piece of are we doing this to save ourselves, or are we doing this to prepare ourselves so that we can save others?
Amen.
And there needs to be a mental shift, even in the country living, the reason behind country living.
I think growing up in the city, for example, it's mentioned that if you get to a level of financial this and that, it becomes progressive, or you develop a level of finances that you can end up becoming free. But I think it was mentioned as a conspiracy theory once before, and many a times we'll see some things in council where it would be, move to the country like it was a time that was far away. But it's possible to be free and be a free slave at the same time without true education. I have friends that live in cities that they earn high salaries, but when you speak to them one-on-one, they're sad that they can't spend time with their family, they can't spend time with their children. You have people that want to go on holiday, they can't go on holiday because the school system has told them that if they take their children away, they'll be fined. And with the threat of being put into a police station. Even with the health education system, with the healthcare system, some people would want to go on holiday, but because of the insulin they're taking, they now have to look on the map and see if the place has stable electricity. Now, these are people that would have means, but in the Babylonian system they're caught in, without God's plan of freedom, it becomes null and void. Once upon a time, this was something that would be in the future or be a conspiracy theory. But if we look at some of the cities during the pandemic and some of these lockdowns, you start to realize that this thing is a problem today. When it comes to even control of your own food, we're dependent on in the cities, dependent on the supermarkets. What happens if the supermarkets don't have it? What happens if the supermarkets are selling it at a price that's too expensive that you can't get it from your family? Even with the healthcare. Recently with some friends that are talking about how they've suffered from a burn and they didn't know what to do. The queues to be able to go to the hospitals are long. But simple aloe vera that they're able to grow can be used to be able to resolve that. The education system, we found that it's a fraud. 2021 in the UK, for example, they were using algorithms to determine whether if a child comes in on time, whether it means they're going to get a certain amount of grade, they get a certain grade. And when you look at it, at that period of time, those that I know that were living in the country, some of them wouldn't know that there was any type of restrictions going on unless they went to a supermarket in which they'll be told that you have to keep a 1 or 2 meter distance. I really do say this to say that even in terms of a quality of living now, moving out to the country, it's the way forward. Because even those with children, is it even a word? The immoralness that can tend to go on in the cities with people living on top of each other and the grab. You come out to the country, you're able to breathe, think, take time, and actually teach your children and have them hear it at the same time, rather than teach them and they go onto Netflix and only God knows what it is they're watching that's influencing their character. So yeah, even as a quality of living now and moving away from certain pillars that have kept us bound, the education system, the working in the job system, unable to sustain oneself properly, being told by politicians that you must do this, you must do, in coming out and getting out, you're able to sustain a better quality of living that it's hard to get in the cities. You'd get one and you realize you're compromising on the other. When you can get it all, God's way when you come out. I think that's, yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned a piece there about it's not theoretical anymore, right?
No.
Right? We're post-pandemic. There is no more theoretical concept. Oh, it's not this course. It's never mind this. No, it's not theoretical anymore. We saw what it looked like when the pandemic happened. Like, anyone that thinks the pandemic was just something, just like another, just an earthquake, like, no. That was, I believe, God's last big warning to us that says, hey, this is what it's going to be like, right? That was the siege of Jerusalem, and then they left, right?
Can I introduce go a bit deeper, and in our previous conversation when we were not recording, you actually shared your experience as well, which and the reason I'm trying to go into this direction is because of the practical, to see. I mean, in our conversation we spoke about this, something that's called the character and the heart, yeah, and then something that's called a good method of teaching, yeah. So sometimes you can have maybe a good method of teaching, but if you don't have the quality and renewed heart and through your vision where you want to go, even with that, you can gain actually a good success in the wrong direction. Or as you have mentioned in your own experience, like I was not part of some kind of official education, but because of the implementation of parts of true education through, in your case, that was your parents, yeah, because you were homeschooled, you have learned particular skills through which you were able to gain other skills, which actually brought you to, or from worldly perspective, really, really successful place, yeah. So I would like maybe if you can share your experience and distinguish which part of that experience has truly helped you and was in good direction, and in which particular now you see there's a necessity to still improve, not to get lost in that process.
Sure. So as we know, I'm not a storyteller. I'm a,
But you tell the story now.
No. But so the 30-second is, yes, I was homeschooled using both sunlight and rod and staff. Well, anyways, I won't find it. The short of it is, my parents homeschooled me. I think it came out like this. The question was, well, how did you get into computers, or how did you get into business, or how did you do these things? Like, who taught you this? I keep hearing this. Like, well, who taught you how to do programming?
I mean, just to remind our audience that you didn't go through actual traditional school, which they teach you that. Yeah?
Right. We went through homeschooling, but candidly, I think most of it was, hey Rob, we're canning peaches today, or come with me, we're gonna go clean a house. Like that's what my homeschool was, and then we did some classroom stuff, but not a lot of math, to be honest, right? Anyways, I guess the point is that I feel like we have been conditioned to be in a mental state where unless somebody hands us something, they're handing us a diploma, then we don't know anything. They're giving us. It's like it almost feels like we're waiting for people to push things on us as a civilization. And I'm saying that is the most neutered and sad existence I can imagine.
Sorry to interrupt, but there is even worse than that.
Yes.
I'll tell you my experience.
Please.
So I went to education of bachelor degree I did in computer science. I finished it and I came out from university with the thought, man, what do I even know? It's like, I don't know nothing, but I got diploma. Then I went.
That's probably not enough. You need to go to the next stage.
Then I went for make the story short. Then I went for the master degrees. First class I had, and there is a professor. He speaks off and says, I went to the diploma, like a doctor degree, PhD, because when I finished master's degree, I felt as if I know nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I even doing here? And it was true. When I finished my master's degree, I felt like, hey, I know nothing. It's not like if somebody hit you with diploma, with the certificate, that you have a feeling that you know something. But the knowledge that I got, that like, okay, I know now something, is when I look back of something I've created behind myself. So if I created this program, this software, or I built a shed or whatever, pull the wires in my in an apartment and make electrical work, I can say, okay, I know this because I've done it. And that's not something that people usually do. And mind me, like, if I came from background of computer science, when we do a lot of practical work, this is all based on practical work, but still I felt like, man, what do I even know? It's like, I don't know.
It's interesting.
Real quick. This says, a practical training is worth far more than any amount of mere theorizing. It is not enough even to have knowledge. We must have the ability to use the knowledge right.
Hi, this is Petra. I wanted just to say it's interesting how this educational system is promoting actually the gaining of knowledge. But what Michael was now just saying, you went through it all, and in the end, you don't even have the very thing it was supposed to give you, the knowledge. Exactly as we heard now this quote, because the reason behind it is that the knowledge which is gained is mostly theoretical and not applicable to real life. Even when it is, there is not the structure of curriculums many times is not built that way that you can use up that knowledge immediately when you learn it. And so you're kind of filling your mind with a lot of stuff that you don't use in that moment, and it goes away after a while. And if you do that for years, imagine when you come to the point when you realize, as Michael said, that actually you don't know anything, and that can be frustrating. I can say for myself that now in this moment of my life, I'm in a period where I'm trying to claim back my mind, my body, and my heart, because I feel like it has been stealed from me for all these years. It's somehow maybe even ironic. Maybe I should explain something of my background. I was born and raised in Switzerland, where the schooling system is actually, I would say, of good quality. We learned many cool stuff there. We learned many. We learned a lot there, and I can say it was also good because it was experiential learning, experimental learning. Yeah. But after that, I moved to Croatia, which is actually the place where my parents were born. And I saw the difference because here it was almost all theoretical, and I kind of lost even the things I knew when I was in Switzerland back then. And the ironic thing that I was mentioning is that after my elementary school and high school, I decided to go and study educational sciences. I thought that after these 5 years, I will know more about how to learn and how to teach, but I feel that now I know less than when I got into college in the first place. So yeah, it's kind of a sad thing. We put God out of our classrooms, and that's what we got. Trying to be wise, we got foolish. So that's something I wanted to share.
There was an interesting line that you said, Rob, that people are, so there's you call it a ladder of success that is kind of portrayed in front and kind of pushed into people. Not pushed, I would say advertised. It's advertised as a common knowledge that in order for you to be able to achieve particular success, even if it's worldly, even if it's in the worldly matters, you need to go through this process. And we are lining it up for you, and that's where you're going to go. But in your personal experience, you have been, a serial entrepreneur. You have learned skills that people like pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in their university. You have learned it yourselves, and except of getting paid job somewhere else, you became an entrepreneur and led other teams together, and you learned those skills too, and opened the companies, sold those companies and stuff, like by never being formally educated in that, which is kind of in defiance of what was on what is advertised out there, and what is common understanding and knowledge. But you have mentioned that phrase as I have created that ladder for myself, and I think it's such a bold move, and to some extent risky, because you're going into unknown. So maybe the purpose of sometimes of conversation is to talk about that unknown ladder that you create for yourself, and to make it less unknown, less scary, because through your own experience, maybe you can share how that actually looked like, and what were the positive sides of that unknown ladder that you have actually created for yourself, or maybe your parents did it for you, and what others can learn, and in which way they can be really encouraged not to be afraid. Because sometimes, most of the time, the reason why we don't take particular decisions, which we feel and see that they are right, because we fear, because we have fear of unknown. And I think there is a time to deconstruct that and say, oh, I understand that you have fear, but I went through this. Let me share. Let me share with you. Let me share what is going to potentially, what are you going to see in that path? Petra, you want to say something as well?
Yeah, something quick. Just maybe one of the most frustrating things I'm experiencing at the moment, and I think that maybe others could relate to that. It's there is one thing which my educational, I'm talking about formal education over here, that my education did not bring to me, and I think that should have been the most important thing. It did not make me free. And
what do you mean by free?
Free thinker, free doer, free in every sense that you can imagine, to maybe connected to what you were saying about fear. When you fear, you're not free. But when you do things out of the right motive, out of the right motive, you're free. And if you're not free, then you are not even happy. So this education is actually not going towards the very goal of life, to make happy people, and for those people to be able to make others happy. This altruistic goal in mind, because this education, traditional education, has not this goal. Actually, it's probably mostly selfish.
Take it.
Right? So I just threw a quote up on the screen. The following methods of teaching are characteristic of Jesuit schools. The memory was cultivated as a means of keeping down free activity of thought and clearness of judgment. In the place of self-government, their method of discipline was a system of mutual distrust, espionage, and informing. Implicit obedience relieved the pupils from all responsibility as a moral justification of their deeds. So there's a couple pieces here, but the big piece that we kind of take away is that as we do memorization, right, we are removed that free thought. We're removed of that, like you were saying, right? And ultimately, we're not free anymore.
Yeah, it's discouraging freedom.
Yes. Over here, the papal system of education repeats set lessons with no thought of making practical application, right? Their whole goal is to stop us from being free thinkers. And that's what I'm trying to say. This is both, one, engineered in order to support the Industrial Revolution. It's also engineered to support suppression of free thought, so we're more easily controlled. Ellen White says that students have spent their time crowding the mind with knowledge, very little of which can be utilized, and content to depend on the judgment and perception of others. Some have gone to another extreme. Student in this area, it lends students, leads students to such education leads students to self-sufficiency, cutting off from the true source of education and power. So, when you're asking the question of a fear, well, that's the answer too, right? The answer is because we are no longer looking to, like it says, the source of true knowledge and power. And so we say, okay, well, let me just go through the system. Let me just kind of, I know that if I go sit in a desk for 12 years, I'm going to get a diploma. Then if I sit in a desk for another 4 years, I'm going to get this. If I sit in a desk for another 2 years, another 4 years, I'm going to get this. And it's almost this idea, their fear of actually going out and trying anything on their own. It's far easier to go to college than it is to be an entrepreneur. Far, far easier. And so I feel that that's the problem, is that we are so afraid because we don't have God as our co-pilot.
That's right. Comfort, convenience.
Yes.
Oh, I really like what you said about it's much easier to go through the regular education than becoming entrepreneur. But if we lose our entrepreneurs, if we lose the actual value creators, yeah. So where are we gonna get? Like even if you look at it from a secular world point, those who are willing to risk and go beyond the already set paths, create new paths in others that walk. What within our education currently exists or is lacking that is helping us to embark on new paths and to create those paths for others as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking as I'm just listening to everything. So how do we hone it in and make it really practical? Because people are in different groups. Okay, there's people that I'm coaching who say, I don't care. I don't know what my purpose is, and I'm okay to go to university, get my degree, go to my 9 to 5, just as long as I get a paycheck end of every month, and hopefully I can fill my house with nice things. And that's it. And my burning thought after listening to that is, how do I inspire in this person a sense of something greater, that they're here for something so much more than surviving? So that's the first thing. Like, how do we inspire in people even the desire to want to leave, right? Because there are some people who are going to listen to this who are here, like, I want to get out, and okay, then how can we make it practical for them? There are some people who are like, I would like to think about getting out, but it just looks way too scary. And there are some people who are just like, so what? As long as I have some money and I can do what makes me happy, I don't really care. And I think, how can we make it practical for these different groups of people? How can we inspire in people the desire to want to change? How can we give people a sense of direction, that are being held back by fear of trying something new? And how can we, for the people who already are past that fear but they just don't know what to do, how can we make that next step practical for them? I think that's where I am in my mind. I kind of categorize into three places, but yeah.
Do we want to take one of those and experiment? Do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah.
So do you want to introduce it as maybe as a question for us then?
Okay, so question, how can we inspire in others who don't even have the desire, a thirst in their heart for something greater than they already have?
I would say talk to them about their value. People don't know how much a soul values actually. They don't have self-respect, and those who have it from the wrong motives, wrong reasons, because they think maybe too high of themselves because of something they have, they own, they do, they think. But when we see what Christ thought about our value and what he showed, he showed it with his life. His whole purpose in life was to live it out, to die, and then to redeem us, to show how much of value we are in God's eyes. And when a person learns that for the very first time, I know what it did to me. When I learned that, my whole life, it was a shifting point in my life, because I realize now that I have a purpose. I'm not here by chance, and that actually I matter in a way that my life is important to someone, and that someone is a creator, someone so big you want to learn about him every day.
Okay.
I would add, if I could add, one of the difficulties is people they fall in, or, and I would also include myself into it, because this was the thing that I was raised with. So your parents says, you gotta have a diploma, you gotta accomplish something. And there are a lot of young people who got to the same thing. You have to do this. And unless you do it, then perhaps their parents were those who didn't manage that. There is this, how to accept, I missed the word, but the word is like, they have, not discredit, but they have this kind of self-value is less now because they have not achieved, they don't have a diploma or someone. It's like, it's easy for me to talk about, now true education and then to say, hey, there are better ways to live your life than go to make your diploma. But if I wouldn't have it, probably I would be in a position to long for it. I've met so many people on two extremes, like there are ones that have accomplished to get some degree, a diploma. And when they appear in the society, they say, I'm this person, and then comes the title. This means so much to them. I laugh to that today, And there are people who have not get that, who are also part of the true education, as we know. And they're also thinking to themselves somehow, oh, I wish I could have a diploma in this, I would be knowledgeable on that and that. So in both sides, it's so hard, in my opinion, to get people out of their mind this worldview. Daniela, you were telling me how you personally have suffered from that and what gets you out of it. Like, this is some things to wanted to share. So, yeah.
Can I just, I know you're raising it, just one sentence. I really like what Petra, what you have said is about understanding our true value. And understanding our true value also comes from our identity. So when we know that we are purchased by the precious blood of Christ, when we know that we are His by redemption and by creation, so this is it. There is nothing. You don't need to some kind of have any addition, okay, and any add up to the value that you have. And today is really laughable that really people find their identity in the level of their formal education. So all these titles that you put, I'm a master, I'm a PhD, I'm a postdoctorate. I know people who are traditionally highly educated, but they never flamper their title in front of themselves, but actually show their, they feel even more responsible to now share actual be of blessing to others by the amount of knowledge and expertise they have in particular field. But I have also seen other people that their educational achievement and title in traditional education becomes almost part of their identity, which then really just says how crumbled their identity is. And I will invite everyone who maybe is facing that problem to look into what Petra was saying about the true understanding of your value outside of the way how the world is trying to portray it.
Yeah, I think
There are several hands we have.
Yeah.
No, not everybody is want to talk now.
Matthew
Yeah.
7:6. I think because it was a direct question on how do you inspire it in people at the moment. And even with Christ's message was for all, but for those some received, some not, some didn't receive it. And in Matthew 7:6 it says, "Do not give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast ye pearls before swine, lest they trample under their feet and turn again and rend you." When it comes to like the message of wanting more for themselves, there are some that they're experiencing a fullness of bread and they need nothing. And maybe the only way is to show examples of people doing this. So maybe when the seed is ready to sprout on their end, then they ask the questions and they can ask more. But there are people at the moment that they're looking for an alternative because something does not make sense. They went through the traditional education system, they did as they were told, they went to the university, they went and got a good job, they got 2.5 kids, they went and lived in some city suburb, and they're still miserable. There are some people that did all these things, and when the interest rates went up, they realized that there's something wrong here. They did everything that they were told, but they've got more, like they're scrambling at the end of the month, or there's things just don't make sense.
Following the wrong blueprint.
100%. It's for those where if they're shown how to do it, but they're shown examples of how to do it, it can be like, oh, how can I go about it? Because we've seen with true education, with it, it's not just about the theoretical talking of it. It's actually showing people that have done it, that then goes like how to be able to do it as well.
Making it approachable.
Precisely. So I think that's a way of being able to, in being able to do that, because that person will have a neighbor who at this time doesn't want to hear it. They're happy living in their suburbia, and the children are wearing their uniforms with the hat, the bag that looks like it carries them to school, until storm happens, and then you look for more information, and you hope by God's grace that they can see an example that's close to them of someone that's done it, where they can ask more questions. There's I think with true education in the Babylonian system, and there's a lot of talking and referencing people that don't have a clue themselves that reference someone else. The true education system, it's actually looking at, okay, who's done it? What did you do? How do I do it? Because, one of the way people overcame was not just by the blood of the Lamb, but also by their testimony as well. So, telling the stories of people that are doing it and showing them how to do it step by step. There's nothing like it. It's my view.
Talking about true value, what we were speaking before, I remember one workshop I had in the school I was working in with some young students. They were actually children, and I knew that they will understand it after these 45 minutes, and they didn't disappoint me. When you work with children, it's easier sometimes to get to the point. I remember that I asked them at the beginning of the lesson, what would they say? What is let's put it this way. I picked one girl and asked her, why would you say that your classmate who is sitting next to you is a valuable person? And we started the lesson in that manner. And she was thinking a little bit, and then she told that she thinks she is a valuable person because she is her friend. So I asked, then when she starts being your friend, she will not be more of a valuable person, right? And then she thought a little bit about it, and I was asking them questions, and the children were answering, and mostly their answers were pointing to some characteristics of the persons they admired or they liked. For example, one kid, he said that he thinks his friend is a valuable person because he's very good at doing what he does, and that's informatics. He's into programming and stuff. So he admired that characteristic in him. And then I asked him, okay, but let's say that tomorrow he actually is not the best one in that, and comes somebody else who is better in that. Does he lose some of his valuability, if I can say it like that, or it stays still? How do you start comparing it then with somebody else? He thought about it, and he was not sure what to answer. And in one moment, the questions went on and the answers went on, and mostly they did not get to the point until one girl, she said that she thinks her friend is a valuable person because of the character she has. But then I realized that that's not it either. And I asked, okay, so until now she's proven to you that she's a kind person, right? That she's polite, that she's altruistic, that she's whatever you can say for a good character, right? But what if tomorrow she somehow changes and she shows a different face to you? Would that make her lose the value she has? And she said yes. But the other kids, they were not so sure about it. And one kid says, no, that cannot be, because we said at the beginning of the lesson that the value of one person must be something which is for everlasting, cannot be something exchanged like from day to day. And in the end of that 35-minute lesson, we came out to the conclusion that even though the character is something which is very near to the answer, it's not that, because God so loved the world that he gave his only son to die for us. When? Not when we were of a character. And they kind of got the point that our value must come from something which is outside of us, which is
Or
not
someone.
or someone. So that was a good lesson.
Thank you, Pedro.
I would. Brunella, would you like to repeat the 3 questions? And
But
I would like to answer.
there were some
the
hands
first.
too. There were some hands
Okay.
too. Like I would.
Mine was on yours, but
Alright.
it's not going to be a story. It would just be
Yeah.
Another narrative.
no. In the sense
I'm
of,
joking. Yeah.
no, in the sense of you said about value, and I think for me what I took from you was 3 pieces. Okay, the first piece was you said people are going to school because their parents say they need a certificate, right? People are going to school because they need to figure out what their value is, right? And other thing is people need to go to school because they need some sort of actionable. They need it to make them. They need to be able to have a living, have a life, right? Security. So I guess that's the kind of, I would say that we need to take the problems, right, that come up, right? So what are the objections to true education? And that's what we need to be focusing on. Super tactical. I know.
Amen.
Right. Okay. So the first thing is that parents are saying, hey, you need a degree. That's what my dad said. Right? My dad told me you need a degree. Why? Because he didn't get a degree.
Yes.
For a while, and so
Yeah.
we were really, we were poor for a period of time while he was getting his degree. Okay, he says, I don't want you to end up like I did, get a degree. And unfortunately, I heard that. I'm like, I'm barely passing high school, and but I'm learning all this stuff. He's like, man, you need to be better because you got to go into college, And then I go in the military. He's like, man, I wish you would have gone in the college, And I'm like, hey, Dad, I just made staff sergeant. He's like, how's that degree coming? Hey, Dad, I just won Airman of the Year for Europe. Again, the 2nd year in a row. How's that degree coming? And it kept being this theme.
Until when?
Well, until I'm in my first million. But the point is,
It's serious.
That's the part that is interesting.
no, that's not the point.
No, but the point is that it broke every, like, the reason why he was putting you there is because of his fear my son will not even financially succeed.
Serious.
And you were going against that firm, and you did.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
and
the
that doesn't
important-
talk about you. That talks about the principle.
But if you have a 5-figure, then he would let you with diploma 5-figure fight. Anyways,
Not even to cut you, just give you an example while you continue. I remember I was playing football one time and Mum was depressed. I was going to play football and the football team said, no, we need to move you out of your house, we're going to give you accommodation and and the pathway looks like this. And Mum said, no, this is not correct. You must go to uni, you must go to university. And she was going Pentecostal church at the time. So she went to see the pastor. I went to the pastor, my son needs prayers and he needs anointing oil as well. Like, I'm telling him to go to school, he should go and study, he's not listening, like there's something wrong with him, I think he might be possessed, please speak to him. I think I put that bit in, but I need to speak to him. The pastor sat down, nodding his head, like licking his lips, not paying attention. And what he said to her was, Miss Jackson, thank you for everything you said, yeah, but I don't know any doctor that earns money like David Beckham, so just let him go and play football. But it's serious, but please continue.
Yeah. So we talk about objections.
This is the objections, right?
Yeah.
So how do we handle it for parents? And I think the first piece is, and this is what I tell my mentees. I say, look, if your parents are telling you to go to college, because by the way, I'm anti-college. I'm anti-formal. I'm anti-Babylonian is what I'm anti, okay? So if a parent is saying, I need you to go to college, first you have to figure out, one, honestly, do I have the capacity to do anything? If you don't have the capacity, and I tell this to the kids, if you are not self-motivated, if you are not a problem solver, if you do not have internal motivation, right, self-motivated, if you don't have a capacity for learning, if you don't have curiosity, go to college, go to school, go to college, and ride the short bus when you get there. Okay, but for those that actually have any sort of level of curiosity, creativity, any desire for self-improvement, right? You do not need to go to, it's just going to slow you down. So
Say that again.
if you do not have, yes, you heard me. It's exactly. So ultimately what I'm trying to get here is that the first thing you need to figure out is one, individually, do you have the capacity to do anything on your own, or are you lazy? Because if you're lazy, then go get a corporate job, work your 9 to 5, and burn, whatever. I'm joking. The second piece in this is, ignore the last part.
No.
The second piece of this is, if you were to say, no, Dad, Mom, look, I'm self-motivated, then prove it to them, right? Allow them to be your investor. Go to them and say, Mom, Dad, I'm so passionate about this. My mom, when she found out I was passionate about computers, she went out and she bought me a computer, put it on a table with a manual and said, I think this manual goes with that, figure it out, okay? The other piece of this is that parents are scared of what they don't know about. A parent says, and again, I'm not a parent, right? But I can understand the concepts.
Because you're a child.
Because I was a child, also because I'm a teacher, right? People, even as a teacher, as a mentor, you'll say, I'm afraid of this because I don't know how to do this for them. And so all of a sudden, let me steer them to the path that I know. As a mentor, sometimes you have this almost this inclination to steer people in a path that you are familiar with, or that you trust, or that you can understand. We need to be able to understand that some people are going to do things completely outside of our capacity. And going back to this idea of when a child goes to a parent and says, look, I want to buy land, I want to live in the country, I want to grow my own garden, I want to learn to be self-sufficient, and then I want to do ministry, right? That should be, and this gets into this idea of resetting what success looks like, that should be seen as, a doctor, a lawyer, right? It should be higher than that. But why do we have this thing where we say, oh, well, get your doctors and your lawyers first,
Much deeper than that.
achieve Babylonian success, and then once you've done that, then you're free to go to the country, right? So that's one of the first pieces, parenting. Let me do 3 and I'll be done with it. I just want to hit all the 3 points. The second piece on that is that we said, okay, what's our internal? So that was external. So our external motivators is your dad says, I want you to go to college. And you say, well, I have a different path. I believe that if they can trust that you're just not going to end up, sleeping in the street somewhere, right? They're going to champion in doing that. So if you are that child, if you are that, that young adult that's like, hey, I want to have a non-traditional path, then show that. Show them how self-motivated you are. Show them how you're learning on your own. Show them how you don't need an educational system in order to make you successful. Again, going back to it, everyone always asks me, well, where'd you learn this? Where'd you learn that? I just learned it, guys. That's the point, right? Okay, the second piece, that's external, internal. Internally, we also need to have some level of validation. What is our self-worth? Yeah. And so I believe that when we're looking at that, and I've mentioned this before in previous conversations, but I'll just, for the sake of this today, I'll say it again. In a lot of civilizations, there's some sort of mechanism where we say we went through, whether it's the Native Americans, right? They would go out on some sort of walkabout kind of thing, they go in the woods, they spend the night in the woods, they come back and they're a man, whatever it is. There's some sort of, the Jews had their, specific rituals that made them feel like they're men. I feel like we need some sort of level of that that allows us to then be able to say, I've crossed the threshold. And I feel like in many instances, college is that for some kids. Like, well, if I go to college and I finish college, then I'm an adult, right? So what are the other mechanisms that we can use for that? And so I guess that's in the piece. Ellen White does have that quote, really great quote, that we all need to have land because and I wish I'd read the quote, but if we have land, it will give us, it will restore in us our something like our dignity and all these pieces that are lost by this system that we're going into. And if I could, just the final point of that is why don't we have our own certification programs? And that's the third piece I want to bring up. So one is, yes, we don't need certification programs. Tell your parents, hey, I have a different path in life. I will be successful because I've demonstrated that. 2 is, how do we start building our identity not around what somebody can give us as a piece of paper, right? But ironically enough, on the third point, why don't we have our own piece of paper? Like, why don't we, as organizations, have our own pieces of paper? I mean, if that's what it takes, if that's something that is a mechanism that makes us feel that, and that's why I feel like if we go to these certifying, these organizations, right?
But it should be rewiring of brain. Like, I don't think we need this.
No, we don't. But there's a level, there's a desire in us to want to achieve, right? Yeah. And if we can say, hey, I went through this journeyman program, I went through this apprenticeship program at Baravoy.
And you learned what? Let's say that you learned. You learned to build houses. What's your proof that I know to build a house? Here, look at it. It's here, built.
Well, that goes back to the whole.
And that gives you certification.
This is my certificate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely the outcome. I think what I will say to marry these 2 points, because yes, we don't want to say here's a certificate so it looks like the system, but it's not. But I think because so many people are wired that way, we can say here's a certificate. And the way to get it is the rewiring of the brain, but they don't know that's what's happening. I mean,
yes.
Like there was the school in Bolivia, I can't remember where it was, and they came like to learn ministry and to learn and the school, they promised them, by the time you come out, you're going to be like, excellent, up to standard, like ministers of the gospel. And they got there and they were like, let's go to the classroom, and they just took them to the field and they gave them like a hoe, and they were like, this is your pencil and this is your paper. And that was it. And they were like, what's going on? They didn't even get it, but they just started to work the field because the people at that school understood, like, they were not going to come in thinking that they're not going to come in unless they think they're going to gain something. But by the time they left, they understood that they didn't need to gain a piece of paper. But the way to bring them in was to say, hey, you're going to gain something. And then in the process, they learned, like, that doesn't even mean anything. I've actually learned something that I can walk out of here.
Daniela, can you repeat these 3 questions where we are sorting out?
Yeah.
So
I will. I just in my head, I just briefly categorized people.
No, I had more on this point.
Oh, yeah, go on. Finish the point.
No, I think it's interesting. So,
Point.
I guess just to finish that piece, the idea of the piece of paper for me was just a leveling, right? If we look at like what I look at, like the guild model concept. So we go into let's say an Advent Center, and we learn a lot about a lot of things, enough to be able to get a sense on what is out there. What does country living look like? What does true education look like? What are some of the fundamentals required in country living, and outpost management and ministry, etc., and missional entrepreneurship. And then once we do that, we say, okay, I was really passionate about this one area, and that's when we then move into more of a journeyman status. Now they're moving into an idea where they're now working in one integrated piece, one smaller niche, and then ultimately to the mastery status is when you actually develop something. You say, hey, this is what I've done. This is my craft. I think through this whole thing, I think there could be a component. Again, I'm going to get super tactical right now in terms of what I think we could do. Mm-hmm. I think we could create an entry-level program that's mostly online. It's not true education, okay, but it's mostly online, and it's a little. At the end of it, you get a little piece of paper, right? And that little piece of paper says you are now an apprentice-level gardener, right? Or a novice-level gardener, whatever it is, right? But the point is, they've gone through. They understand soil science. They understand basic things. This is for people who live in the city, who have some sort of Babylonian mindset, right? Who have not gotten out yet. Allow them to ease into this. Give them something tactical. Give them something tangible that draws them in and says, okay, hey, I really am interested in having a certificate program, because it gives them some level of self-worth. Because we can't just completely move them out, right? We have to coerce them out. That's what I'm thinking. Once they then have that level 1, which is primarily online, then maybe they show up and they do a practical exam, something like this. Then we actually say, now come out to one of our centers, right? And pick one of these topics and let's go deeper in that topic. Anyway, again, I don't have to get into the taxes of that. So let's go back to your 3 questions.
So the question that I would like to answer, the first question is, like, the question was, how do we make people understand, and a willingness to come and accept the true education? That was the question.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, to inspire them. The 3 questions was, I think we kind of answered it, but keep going. I think everyone said kind of. One was, how do we inspire in people the desire even, and I think still speak to it, but let me just summarize it. I heard demonstrate it. One, just demonstrate it. And some people will say, don't want that, and there's nothing we can do about that. And some people will say, that looks good, and we can talk some more about their value. The second one was, two, the people that have a desire but are really fearful about stepping out of the norm. But wait a minute. Yeah, I feel something in me that's not congruent if I keep going this, but I'm afraid. Parents, societal norms, expectations. I'm afraid. How is it that we help them to move past their fear? And the third one was the people that have moved past their fear, have desire, move past their fear, but they just don't know what to do. Right? So I'm ready to go. How do we give them something practical to say, okay, here's how you do it, which is what you were talking about. Like, okay, so that let's have an actual system then where you can learn and grow in these levels to accomplish the success that you're looking for, a different kind of success in the right way. I think that's
I think that all boils down, like most effective way to inspire people is to say, hey, come and see.
Yeah.
It's all what it comes. But
That's
now
what it
this
is,
is much more harder and difficult than here talking about how things gonna look like, because I know personally I know some Adventist communities it's a disaster. They got out of the cities, they got together. Doesn't work, they fight over small things, they're envious of one another, they live together, and it's like hell. Okay, and that's not a place that would say, hey, you want a true education, blah blah blah, you come here, see the homesteads and so, because it's a hell, you don't want to see. So I'm saying there are some components in these talks that they are very practical. They're supposed to be, hey, come and see. What are the places that you can come and see that you say, okay, this is something it's amazing. I wanna be here among these people, I wanna learn more and be here, even to do small things like mudding the walls, okay, that nobody wants to do, but I wanna do because I wanna be here. I know for myself, I came from one moment I was in Austria in one school. It's called TGM. I came them accidentally, was not planning to there, and I just ended up in that school, which is a sanatorium. It's a school that goes with the principles of true education. And then I just came when there was the classes on the history of true education. So I watched this. I was there present. It was so interesting to learn about the history. And the thing that really put me a desire to come and then take the entire 1-year course in that school was not that I learned about the history of true education. It was because I was there, because I've seen these people and I got excited about it. And I think that's something that is needed. The world needs to see a place. Jesus said, they asked him, where are you staying? So come and see. That's supposed to be an advertisement.
Yeah, can I just add on to that, and then I'm finished. In that, I was really, I know the Holy Spirit's here, because I was really thinking, as I was thinking my same question, I was thinking, what did Jesus do? And it's almost like, to the first inspire, he was like, come and see. That's how they inspired him. And it says to many people, what does he say? That they rose emancipated from the life and followed him. They were freed. They looked and they were like, wait, it's possible. They listened, they looked, oh, it's possible. And they had this sense of freedom. The next, with his disciples, it was kind of like, learn and do. Learn of me. And then he sent them out to do it. So they were being apprenticed by him. And the third thing that he sent them out to do was teach, right? Live and teach. So he wasn't even in their lives anymore. But what they were, once they came and saw, then they were learning of him and doing it. And then they left him to live it and to teach it to others, it was re-ingrained in their lives. And other people were watching them, and that was other people's come and see. So it was this whole cycle. I was like, wow, so that was kind of what was coming in my mind while we were talking. And yeah, I think that's the model. That's okay. To live it.
Okay, so let's do this.
Oh wait, one more thing I wanted to say is, just on that point of we need places that you can come and see, right?
No, it's literally going to get there.
Okay, well, I don't think I'm going to say what you're going to say, so still say it. What I do want to say is, people go to those places and it's like, you mentioned it, Michael, like it's like a hell because they're not getting on, it's just and I think something that's needed in these places, I just want to talk about, is honesty. Is the honesty of saying, we're human beings, we're still in church militant, right? We are actually still working out our character, so there's going to be some clashes. Maybe being honest about, I've got some defects in my character, that's something I really appreciate. I'm not a people person, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know how much that's true, but anyway, I appreciate the honesty at least.
That's Robert's marketing line, by the way, but that's another topic.
Anyway,
that's for another presentation.
Another course. I think that honesty is the most important thing, because I think what it is, as human beings, we want to present this perfect picture. Like, come to us, here there'll be no disruptions, there'll be no disagreements. That's never going to be true. But come here and learn how to overcome disagreements, because they're going to happen. That's more. Anyway,
realistic.
honesty.
It's realistic, yeah.
So to that, when we're saying, hey, let's demonstrate, which by the way, 100% in. Well, now we need centers to demonstrate on, right? The demonstration requires application. Demonstration requires execution, right? And it requires that on scale. And so I love the idea of come here, Jesus model, come and see, and then
learn and do.
see one, learn one, or see one, do one, teach one, right? Is the concept.
Yeah.
But that means we need this to be scaled, and I think that's where it comes in. So I think there's two pieces. First piece is we need to identify outposts, identify homesteads, identify locations where they're doing this model because they exist. Elijah in the cave, right? I'm Elijah. We're Elijah in the cave, right? But there are other, that haven't bowed the knee. Let's find those, and I think that's this identification process. I think we need to have a database of different homesteads, different outposts that say, hey, you can come to us, we're doing these principles, or we're doing this application of the principle, right? And the other part in that is that we need to be realistic at what this actually looks like. Like, what is a homestead, right? And I feel like there's in a different topic. So I want to talk at some point about realistic, what's realistic. So we'll get into that later. But I think if we could identify one, what's out there, and then two, identify the people that want to get out there, right? Now let's narrow in on them. Okay, the people that say, I'm enough, I've had enough, I want to get out of the city, but, now let's figure out what the problems are. But I can't get out there because I don't have land, or I have land or the capacity to buy land, but I don't have a clue in what I would do, right? I don't have the tools or the knowledge to be able to prepare the land, build a house, put the infrastructure together, start a garden, right? Or I have the capacity to do gardening, but I don't know how I'm going to pay my cell phone bill, my car payments, whatever it would be, buy seeds, The other one says I have
school debt.
Right, school debts, yes. Right, yes, Babylonian school debt. Man, that's a stinger. That is a stinger. Okay. The other piece of that is that they may say, I have the capacity to have land, or I already have land, and I'm doing this, but I'm so overworked that I don't have a time in the day to do any evangelism. Nevertheless, and I feel like I'm growing further away from God because I'm not having a relationship. I don't feel like there's any community. I don't feel like these different pieces, right? And I feel like it all drills down to finance, manpower, and ultimately a connection with Christ. And
Can I add one?
Please do.
This is I will just add, you continue. Often something I've heard was, if I go to country, people in the countryside are very mean. There's a small communities, in the countryside, and they are very mean.
Oh, really? I never heard that.
Yeah. This is often that happens. Well, depends on the country to country, I would say. But speaking from Croatian side,
they're narrow-minded.
Yeah, and they're full of lies, and those things are true. So, what's the solution? I'm just coming on the same community. Like, together make community.
Yes.
Like,
Yes, yes, yes.
Same-minded people to live together. Yeah, go ahead.
So this kind of goes back into, you know, why are we all sitting around this together? What's our mission, right? And I think, like, what are the problems that we want to solve? And for me right now, I'm saying, could we solve the problem of identifying existing outposts, that where we can say, hey, kid, you know, whatever, you know, city dweller, you want to come and see, here's a list of places you can come and see, right? Or could we...
Can you pitch the Advent Outposts or Advent Homestead?
Sure.
Sure,
So-
that's the point. Come on.
So I believe that there should be a directory, right? I believe the same way you have Airbnb, you have Woof, you have Couchsurfer, you have different models, volunteer tourism models, hotel models, etc. I believe that you have those models for why not have those models for us? Why can't we have a directory that says, here, I'm renting a room, and you can come stay, or I have a room and you can come. So I'm having a room, come pay and stay, or I have a room, come volunteer and stay, and here's what I need done in the garden. Or, by the way, I can actually teach you about plant propagation, about beekeeping, about whatever it would be. I can teach you these things. Come and stay and learn. Or I have an extra bedroom in my house where I have a massage table. I have an extra bathroom in my house that I've set up to be for hydrotherapy, right? Why aren't we thinking about micro ministries? And I guess this goes back to, it's going to be a tangent, but I feel like when we look at like this, the examples that we have for right now, the examples, if I were to say let's populate a directory, I'm going to hear, well, there's, here in Romania, there's Dumbrava, and there's, Hergulia, and there's all these names. Those are massive centers. Those are not replicable by somebody in the city that says, I read the message from Ellen White that says I need to have a medical center of some sort, or I need to have a training center, or I need to have a publishing center.
Every home a sanitarium.
Yes. Why do we need to reset not only what success looks like, but in the country, we need to reset what is approachable. We need to have micro sanitariums. We need to be having micro training centers. We need to be having micro publishing centers. And if He is faithful in small things, is great, faithful in larger. So if we have this mindset of I'm just going to do something small, and then we prove ourselves, God is going to entrust us with something bigger. But I feel like we're all trying to replicate these huge models out of what? Ego? Out of hubris? Why are we replicating these models that are way too big for us, and they're never going to get done? Let's start small. Let's forming a grassroots effort of having a directory, identifying what's out there, and then plugging that into. So there's an asset directory. It's a location directory. Let's now plug in another layer, which is the human factor. Who is there? Well, my name's Bob. I do, whatever. I cut. I'm a carpenter. I'm Bob the carpenter. Okay, Bob the builder, and I am willing to do this. I'm willing to do small workshops. I'm willing to have a mentor, a mentee. I'm willing to be involved in speaking. I'm willing to, different things that I'm willing to be. That can then be accessed in different ways. So Bob the Builder is now in a database, which I know Adam's like, I don't want to be in a database. Believe me when I tell you, you're already in a database. Let's just not pretend, okay? So Bob the Builder is an admin in his database, okay? And we then are able to say, I'm a homeschooling mom. I'm going through a true education program, but it's a little bit stale. Even if it's sunlight, we're reading about how Jesus was a carpenter, but my kid has no idea what a hammer is, right? Or how they never even put a hammer in their hand. And so I'm teaching them about how Jesus was a carpenter, but they've never held a hammer. Now, just because you're at home doing homeschool does not mean you're doing true education, right? True education is immersive, right? So I believe that if we could then have homeschoolers, mothers, fathers, be able to access the directory and say, and maybe a collection of them, by the way, that's another piece, is having connectivity of homesteads, connectivity outposts, that's another piece, connectivity of communities. But if we were to say, I'm looking for, I want to have my kid actually be able to swing a hammer. Okay, I go in the directory, Bob the Builder's, a couple miles down the road, right? Hey Bob, would you be willing to allow my kids, me and 3 other neighbors to come over and give a demonstration on, how to put a nail in a board? And Bob's gonna say, sure, because I'm in the directory, I'm willing to do that. I can do it, these different times, we can coordinate that. I believe that's how we're gonna be able to start really making homeschooling come alive, making true education come alive at an early age, as well as later on. I think with this, as we start then looking at maybe that child progresses a little bit more, and now Bob is able to say, hey, I'm willing to take on a mentee, or better yet, an apprentice. Maybe Bob actually is a commercial carpenter. And now this kid is able to now start going out with Bob on commercial jobs. And at first he's not making any money, but then later on, as he starts proving himself, Bob actually starts paying a couple bucks here and there, right? And all of a sudden now he's got his own jobs, he's got his own gigs, he's now actually doing, he's a subcontractor for Bob, and then journeyman, right? And then later he comes out and he's got his own client, he's gonna do his own first project, master, right? This whole idea of how do we start tracking and progressing people? If I could just keep in this narrative a little more, what if I want to get into what if this kid wants to get into a specialty, and he then sees that we can even form pathways for them. We could say, come to this training center first, learn about what's out there. Now you've showed interest in carpentry. Go to this another outpost center. Not even, when I say outpost center, homestead, right? Go to this homestead and stay with this family. When and Frizzy talks about home leadership, talks about how every home is a school, right? Yep. Send him there, right? Let him be there for a couple weeks. He learns what he can learn in a couple months, whatever it is, right? And then move the next kind of piece to learn maybe a different specialty. Maybe from one he's learning about framing, and the other ones he's learning more about now woodworking. Whatever it is, you can keep kind of learning more specialties. Anyways, I guess the idea is that if we just need a network, we need a directory. That's just one application of this. I think the other application is, why don't we have we're talking about sustainability, we need to make money. Why don't we have a directory of all of the home sanitariums, all of the home training centers, all of the home businesses, the different things. They could be an event center. Let's set people up with a mindset that, okay, you have a place that somebody could put a tent at. There's a site called Hip Camp. It's not in Romania yet. There's a site called Hip Camp in the United States. People are renting for $30 a night, $50 a night, $20 a night. They're renting a tent space in somebody's backyard. We need to be going through. We need to have a mind to be thinking about what are our assets. What is our inventory? Right? We're out here in the country, and we're like, oh, we're so poor. No, you're the richest ones. You have the most assets. You need to leverage the assets in a way that is, one, allows you to be more financially sustainable, and two, actually brings people to you to witness. Now again, I have this thing that it's just, look, I love people that go out and hand out tracts, hand out globe tracts, great controversies, whatever it is. They're doing God's work. I'm just saying, I don't know, I'm just feeling like it could be even more effective in a more intimate setting.
Yes.
Larger trust settings. Why go to the city? Now, Enoch did. Enoch went to the city, okay? But why go to the city and try and minister when we could develop mechanisms, systems where people come to us? So we're looking at building extra little extra little cottages, extra little rooms. They come, they volunteer, they're learning a skill, and it's starting to rain. So I think I've talked long enough, but.
Well, you're on a roll. I'm glad that we had that recorded.
Should we finish here?
Should we pray? And I think we have. Unless you have more. I know. I just kind of.
No, yeah. Should we tie it off? I mean, we've.
So what's our call to action?
Yeah.
What is our call to action? We have to to be a momentum, to be a movement. We need a call to action.
Okay. Have you pitched?
He did.
.com.
He did some, yeah.
Well, no, we've got Advent Homesteads.
AdventHomesteads.com. If you want more resources, go to AdventHomesteads.com. Click on the Guides tab, and there's a ton of different resources around thinking through this. There's also, there's a phase, a steps that we want to do. We want to make this actionable. And AdventHomesteads.com, if you go to guide, you go to the very, very bottom. It says phases. This is stuff that we want to build out. we should have a phased approach of how to leave the city, how to get into the country. We should have actionable steps. That's stuff that we want to be doing. We want to be launching things that make things. We want to make country living approachable, right? These conversations. This is how we make it approachable, guys. It's possible. Come and see.
Come and see.
Right? We want to make it actionable. Now that you came and see, here's some blueprints. We just did this floor plan, right? Those little cabins down there, right? I don't know if we can point the camera down there if it would show, but these little cabins we just built, those are $4,000 a piece, $5,000 a piece. We can build those each, right? Here's the floor plans we used. Here's the exact building materials we used. Here's the information we need in order to learn this. Here's some support groups of other homesteaders in your area you can connect with, right? And then how to make it sustainable, and that's missional entrepreneurship. How do we actually look at our assets? How do we start leveraging our assets in a way that we can be sustainable in the country? So if you're interested in joining this movement, what?
Well, that's the thing. Listen, if you've been listening to this by chance, right? Or if you stumble across this and your heart's been burning like the men on the walk to Emmaus, like, we need to hear from you. Not because we're some great people in the background doing something, but because we need to come together. If you're out there, you may be thinking, is there anyone else like you? Guess what? There is. And we need this to go worldwide, global. So it doesn't matter if you're in Timbuktu or you're in Wales. Listen to this. Kitty, please find a way to contact. Just say, I heard the crazy podcast, okay? Because the truth is, it's only crazy to the world, but in heaven this is making sense. And let's come together. If we want to turn the world upside down, you want to be a part of that, really, and you're ready to say, I'm willing to forsake all to try to figure out this something better. None of us have it all together, but I think
together.
Yeah, but together we can do something bigger.
Amen.
Amen.
For God.
Should we close with a prayer?
Yes.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we just come before you and we thank you for this opportunity to first just to bring the people that you've brought here together. Lord, we know this is not by accident. Father, we just want to thank you for inspiring us our hearts, a desire to serve and a desire to help others. Lord, we have read and are convicted by the words that you say through your prophet that we should be focused on leaving the city in order to help the cities. Father, I ask that you give us a sense of urgency in our hearts, help us understand the times we're living in, help us understand the roles that we have. Father, I also want to ask that you not allow us to feel overwhelmed by this and help us to understand that it's going to take a community to make this happen. No one individual is going to be able to make this happen. And so, Lord, we ask that you help us understand the part that you have for us. You help us understand really what our capacity is and what we're able to do. If we are able to garden, Lord, we ask that you pair us with those that have land. If we just have a heart just to do full-time ministry, Lord, we ask that you pair us with a place that we can be free to do that. And Lord, we also ask in a special way that you reach out to the businessmen and those that have the mindsets that you've given them for ultimately those that are right now being successful in the capitalist world. We ask, Lord, that you convict them and bring them in, that they can help us understand, Lord, really just the models that you have for us. And there's so many quotes about how we need businessmen and women that are managing the finances and the things that those that you've given other gifts to are not there. Lord, it feels like that if we could come together, Lord, it feels like that we could do so much more for you if we were in unison together instead of trying to do everything on our own. And so I just ask, Lord, if that is your will, that you place that on our hearts individually and collectively. Lord, I want to thank you for those that are here, and I thank you just for the location that we're able to be in right now, and thank you for just your generosity. Lord, we ask that you help us make it a pathway for others to come out and help them to be able to reset away from just the indoctrination that they've been in, and help them understand that true success is not a fancy car, an apartment, and an active Instagram account, right? That we can reach these youth to help them understand that success is connecting with you and being closer with you, and the only way to do that is to hear your voice and we can hear your voice much better out in nature. And so we just ask, Lord, that you create the settings for just a closer walk with you. Lord, for those that maybe did stumble upon this, Lord, we ask that you convict in their hearts any opportunity, the path that you have for them. Help us to bring this together as a movement that ultimately hastens your return. Lord, we know that we are looking for your return, but we want to also hasten it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.